Might be smoking on something loud. Head to the clouds. I ain't been stepping out. Tired of sticking out in the crowd. This world is changing right in front of me. Gray hairs, I'm aging. Thought I'd be.
I'm that bass in your trunk, the bullet that missed Trump, the gun that jammed, cause it seemed God had other plans. The son of man extending his hand, the son of Sam, and forgiveness for all of the homicides we witnessed. The over-dramatized, the traumatized with sickness, thrown in a pan and caramelized for richness, and served on a plate with sirloin steak to billionaires who don't care. The world's gonna break, long as they make money off it. Pain brings profit, one man gains it, soon as the next man lost it. There's a bridge you can walk to hear God talk, but there are real slim odds a rich man crosses, cause greed is a poisonous seed indeed. As it spreads like weeds through the mind's apple trees, I proceed with caution, and I'm not flossing. Unlike some, I'm not defined by my fortune, I'm defined by rhymes. Though I'm in my prime, there was times that I was down cause I thought I lost it, but no, lo and behold, as my poetry grows, I give all glory to God as the story unfolds, and the gray hairs that grow on my head will show. Ain't no time limit to get it, you ain't never too old, so keep hold of your dream, no matter how it seems. If you don't water your lawn, well then it won't stay green. I seen babies turn fiends, addicted to the screen. The dad shares, cashiers replaced by machines. Don't buy, subscribe, so you can just stream your content like rent. You won't own a thing before long, all the songs the whole world
KBLA
sings.
Talk 15. I hate to interrupt J. Cole when he's flowing like that. It's like, what could I say that would be better than that? No thing. But it's time for third hour, and we've got a great guest, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the U.S. Department of State, where he oversaw the Bureau's work on the Western Hemisphere and Africa. He was a senior advisor in the Office of the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights at the Department of State, where he led the portfolio on Western Hemisphere migration and strategy to prevent conflict and promote stability. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the U.S. Department of State, Enrique Roig. Welcome.
Good morning, Dominique. It's great to be here with you this morning.
Yeah, great to have you back. A lot has transpired since we last spoke. Almost do not know where to start. So let's start big picture. I mean, you know, from your experience working with USAID and the folks that you know that have done work there, your knowledge of their programs worldwide, in a big picture view, where would you say we are right now?
Yeah, Dominique, I wish I had good news for you, but unfortunately it's been a pretty bleak couple of months since the last time we talked. Since that time, essentially USAID has been, for the most part, completely dismantled. And so that has really affected our ability to be able to provide humanitarian assistance to displaced populations overseas and war-torn countries, as well as our global health programs, HIV/AIDS prevention, for example. In addition to that, just a couple of weeks ago, we also saw the State Department lay off 1,300 career and foreign service officers, which has really, debilitated the State Department's ability to do a lot of things that are important for our national security, from negotiations on conflict prevention to paving the way for economic investments overseas to human rights reporting. All of these offices that were in charge of those kinds of efforts were completely dismantled, in some cases completely shut down. So we're seeing, a real dismantling of our foreign policy and development apparatus at this current moment. The Trump administration likes to sell this as, a way to reorganize the State Department and USAID and somehow make it more efficient, but it's hard to see how that's actually the case. Take the example of Gaza, for example, where we're seeing horrible images of starving kids. If USAID was still around, they'd be in a position to actually provide support to these populations. Similarly, in places like Sudan and South Sudan, which are also being impacted by conflict and are in need of humanitarian assistance. And then I'll just say, also in terms of migration to the U.S., USAID was instrumental in programs that were mitigating migration to the U.S. and were really having an impact, particularly the last part of the Biden administration. Trump is obviously focused on deportation as his main his main focus. But as I like to say, you can't deport your way out of this problem. So you also need programs to actually mitigate and address the root causes of migration. So that's kind of where things stand now. It's a really precarious moment. Many of us are working to try and see ways that we can fill the gaps that currently exist with other efforts and advocacy to hopefully restore some semblance of foreign assistance in the future.
Man, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. We'll start with the most stark. You said USAID has been completely dismantled. Now, I'm reading reports and different data, and what's being put out by this administration is that there are cuts and that some programs remain and some are being restored by judges. And so to hear you say that it's been completely dismantled sort of gives the lie to that information, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this is where the administration tries to play a little bit loose with the facts. What they're attempting to do is, as they put it, to integrate, whatever is left of USAID into the State Department at this moment. But it's really not anything left. I mean, almost the entire personnel of 10,000 staff have been laid off. I think there's probably around 200 that are still left to implement programs. But this is where it gets. This is where it becomes problematic, is the capacity that USAID had to implement these types of humanitarian assistance programs overseas really has been completely, like I say, dismantled. And so this is why we're seeing such a weak and limited response by the administration in countries in conflict that need the support. And you saw recently with the rescission package where there was about $8 billion of foreign assistance there that the Trump administration pretty much clawed back, except for about $400 million for PEPFAR programs, which were started under the Bush administration to provide medicines for HIV prevention. So again, when you look at the full panorama of what's left, it's very small in comparison to what we had. And this reorganization that's been led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, really, like I say, with the elimination of 1,300 career staff last week or 2 weeks ago at the State Department, is just, further indication that we're going in the wrong direction.
It's unbelievable to me that Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, as the son of immigrants, as somebody who has some knowledge of how these so-called soft power programs impact countries. I mean, being of Cuban descent, it's just unbelievable to me that he is the person executing this policy and advocating for it so vehemently.
Yeah, Dominique, I mean, it's unbelievable to many of us because it's like we have two Marco Rubios, right? We have the Senator Marco Rubio, who was often the biggest advocate of USAID and foreign assistance. He went on many delegations to visit programs overseas and is quoted many times. You can Google it on, YouTube and check out all the videos of him talking about the importance of USAID as a soft power tool of U.S. foreign policy. And now you have the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's completely changed his tune and is often seen or heard degrading USAID and cherry-picking things that are completely accurate to portray USAID as a wasteful and inefficient agency. So it's unfortunate that he's gone in this direction. I think ultimately at the end of the day, history will not be kind to him in the way that he's gone about undermining what was really once, a real important tool of U.S. soft power and foreign policy diplomacy.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised. When you think about J.D. Vance, what he had to say about the president, who is now his biggest defender, I guess that's one of the features of that administration in a sense. But
that's correct.
When you mentioned PEPFAR and the $400 million that was kind of, I guess, saved or whatever from that recession of $8 billion. These are the kinds of stories that make it seem like USAID is still functioning. Oh, well, the PEPFAR, the AIDS medicine program is still going, so they must still be doing something.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. So they, for the most part, try and portray this again as like this reorganization to cut waste. But when you look at the actual numbers, USAID, which was had a budget of about anywhere between 40 and 60 billion annually, has now been reduced to essentially this $400 million PEPFAR program. So this has real implications for the ability to do much of anything else. There was actually a Lancet study report that came out in June this year, which estimated that the ongoing funding cuts and dismantling of AID could lead to at least 14 million additional preventable deaths by 2030, including almost 5 million children under the age of 5, right? So when you look at those numbers and the impact that's going to have globally, it's pretty devastating, right?
2030 is right around the corner. That's insane. 14 million deaths by 2030, including 5 million children, is nasty work.
And then further, the study also projected that up to almost 11 million new HIV infections and another 3 million HIV-related deaths, largely due to the reduction of PEPFAR programs. So, again, we're talking about a massive scale of human lives that are going to be affected by what this administration has done by dismantling USAID and our foreign assistance programming overseas. Because, again, it's not even AID. It's also when you look at the State Department, which had a whole bureau called Population, Refugees, and Migration, which also did a lot of humanitarian assistance work overseas. And that agency now has been sort of reoriented to this new philosophy of, I guess what they're calling it, remigration, or basically trying to send people back to their countries of origin. So we've gone from trying to mitigate and prevent migration to the U.S. to now focused on how do we send folks back. So we are in very interesting times for sure, and none of this bodes well, I think, also for U.S. national security, because, again, a lot of these, USAID programs, when you're preventing deaths overseas, you're also, building important relationships with countries, but also preventing further destabilization and chaos where people might then decide they want to migrate out of there, whether they're going to Europe or the United States. So, it's not only a good cause, but it's also actually in our best interest to do these things, right? So, and that's where we've sort of lost sight of that. And unfortunately, I feel like much of the American public is kind of maybe asleep at the wheel on this stuff and not getting all the information they need to have an accurate picture of how this impacts them on a daily basis. And so,
Well, that's one of the reasons we're very glad you're here. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the U.S. Department of State. Enrique Roig is our guest, and we'll continue when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now.
800-550-9651.
Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS.
Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start.
Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems.
We have over 1,000 5-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau.
You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com or call
800-550-9651. That's 800-550-9651.
Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
Give people what they want.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we aim to foster enlightening, sustainable, restorative dialogue, and we welcome unapologetically progressive viewpoints that empower fellow citizens. We are now accepting submissions for KBLA Talk 1580 guest editorials like this one.
For the KBLA Talk 1580 guest editorial, I'm Martin Gordon, chair of the Pasadena Community Coalition. Recently, I listened to a Tavis Smiley Show conversation with James Farr. James said something that caught me off guard. blackout that Dina is gone. My community is being murdered. I said murdered.
All you have to do is go to our website homepage at KBLA1580.com and click on the icon that says KBLA Guest Editorials to learn more about our editorial standards and content submission guidelines. As long as the topic aligns with our mission, we are happy to review your submission and consider it for broadcast. We can't make any promises, but we want to amplify progressive perspectives that are community-focused and solution-oriented. So, go to KBLA1580.com right now to download all the information you need about our guest editorials. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank is on a mission to fight hunger and provide nutritious food to those in need across our community. They partner with federal, state, and local programs advocating for better policies and funding for critical hunger relief programs like Cal Fresh, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the Child and Adult Care Food Program. The food bank works with coalitions and local representatives to make sure hunger is addressed in every district of LA County. They also run nutrition education campaigns, raise hunger awareness, and source nutritious food for distribution, all while supporting regulations that allow food pantries to operate safely. Want to help? Visit lafoodbank.org or call 323-234-3030 to volunteer or find a food bank near you. Together, we can ensure that no one goes hungry in Los Angeles County. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
I do appreciate you. I always appreciate the conversation going on in the YouTube comments. YouTube.com, KBLA 1580 is where you can find those. Continuing our conversation now with former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor for the U.S. Department of State, Enrique Roig, talking about the updates that he can share to what's happening with our USAID agency and soft power in the world. Two big picture things I want to go back to. One of them is I've decided that every day we're going to do some kind of what I call a pledge of courage or fearlessness. I say fearlessness is the way forward. There's just so much bad news and disheartening information on our national and international radar right now. And I just feel like there has to be, the pushback has to be the people. And the only way we're going to do that is if we're feeling empowered and not freaked out. Some of these things that are happening, I feel are meant to intimidate us. So I guess the question is, what keeps you courageous? What keeps you speaking out? You're no longer there. You could just go about your business and pretend none of this is happening.
No, Dominique, and that's a great question. I totally agree. We do need to, offer more hope in this moment. I think there's plenty of it, actually. I've been super encouraged to see former colleagues of mine from USAID and now the State Department who are, actively speaking out in the media, but also, advocating here with Congress and back in their home states to, do a better job of communicating to the public the importance of USAID and foreign assistance and how it, affects our own national security, but also something that a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the investments that actually USAID made in our own economy here in the U.S. For example, buying food commodities from Midwest farmers that were then deployed and shipped overseas to countries where there were populations who needed it. And those are major investments that now farmers are, being impacted by, or grants to universities to do research on different development economic programs overseas, or how USAID also, paved the way for U.S. companies to invest overseas and open up markets by promoting, stable democracies and anti-corruption efforts. So there's a big story, larger story to tell. And again, like I say, I'm greatly encouraged by how many people now I see out there doing that. There's, weekly meetings that happen here on the Hill in Congress to go and speak with different offices to talk about, the impact that these programs have back in home states of, representatives and senators. And So this is an important moment, for all of us. I think one of the takeaways that I have is, we didn't do a good enough job in the past of articulating and communicating why these things matter to the U.S. Public. And so I'm hopeful that now, by doing that, that we can rebuild back in the future and have a stronger U.S. foreign assistance program with much more public support behind it, and a larger understanding of why these things matter to U.S. national security in the long term.
So back to why these things matter. Explain what soft power is.
So soft power, I like to always use the example of General Mattis, who was the Secretary of Defense in the first Trump administration. And he always used to say, if you don't fund the State Department fully, then I need to go buy more ammunition. And why is that? Well, because USAID helped prevent crises like conflict, pandemics, mass migration before they required military intervention or emergency response, right? So AID would actually serve as an early warning system. But, as a soft power tool, meaning that by providing development assistance, humanitarian support, these types of initiatives in countries in conflict or crisis would often help to either, stabilize populations that were on the risk of starvation or mass migration, but also help in the negotiation and prevention of conflicts, which, again, we know when these things happen anywhere in the world, it often leads to mass displacement. So that's what we mean by a soft power tool, in the sense of it's not military, it's not necessarily diplomacy, but it's development in combination as part of that triad. That's always been an important tool of U.S. Power overseas, to put it that way. And so without that now, we're sort of left only with really the military approach. And I have to say, for the investments that were made, USAID, as its overall budget, was only 1% of the total U.S. national budget, right? 40 to 60 billion annually. You now look at the U.S. defense budget, which is now going to surpass $1 trillion. That is 23% of our entire national budget that was passed in the Trump Big Beautiful Bill, right? So, our priorities at times are a little bit skewed, and unfortunately, the public doesn't realize that and thinks that we're spending more like 20% on foreign assistance, when that's not the case. So very little, we can have a lot of impact. I want to say the average U.S. taxpayer probably spends more money on buying coffee at Starbucks than they did investing in U.S. foreign assistance.
Wow.
So, again, this goes back to how we communicate this to the public, right?
Well, and it's hard to get your mind around that, because when we're hearing these numbers, $1 billion this, $4 million that, but we forget how big the total U.S. budget is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? And you look again at the percentages, like I said, 23% on military spending, another 23% just on the interest on our debt. So right there, you're almost eating up half of our entire budget, and then you include what we spend on Social Security. You're really, at the end of the day, left with 25% for other spending, which includes the 1% for USAID. So we're not talking about a lot of money here. Unfortunately, like we said, this is sort of when Doge, with Elon Musk, went after USAID in the beginning, we would say this is sort of the canary in the coal mine, because what really they were trying to do also was to test how far they could go with dismantling a federal institution, which only Congress legally can do, right?
Right.
And so then quickly after that, we saw them go after the Department of Education and then NIH. And so, this is played across the board as part of an overall strategy to really dismantle a lot of federal agencies. And USAID, unfortunately, was kind of the first one on the chopping block, because it was an easy one to go after. There wasn't really a strong public constituency behind it that was going to go out and rally, hey, we need to save foreign assistance, right? And so this is where we're at the moment.
Well, and I think, and we're up against news, traffic, and sports. You can address this when we continue. But I think there's many reasons for that. One of the reasons being that we conflate foreign aid with the military budget, which is insanely inflated. And many times when we think of foreign aid, we think of billions and billions of dollars being sent to Ukraine or Israel. And we have people starving in our streets who are homeless. We have folks telling us we can't afford reparations for the descendants of enslaved Black Americans, et cetera, because we don't have any money. But we're not making the distinction between foreign aid and military aid. And I think that's part of where the misconception comes in. We've got news, traffic, and sports right now. Then we'll continue our conversation with Enrique Roig on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. Over 170 people were evacuated using emergency slides after an aborted takeoff on a Denver to Miami flight.
When I heard the boom, I knew something was wrong. There was a loud noise from under a plane. I knew something serious just happened.
The FAA says a landing gear issue caused the American Airlines jet to stop suddenly. One person had a minor injury. Black 38-year-old Khalees Karan Crowder from Glendale, California has been arrested for allegedly engaging in inappropriate behavior at a Walmart in Burbank. Crowder was taken into custody after being spotted sniffing a woman's backside inside the store. He is currently being held on $100,000 bail and is scheduled to appear in court on August 1st. And 5 new members just joined the Baseball Hall of Fame, including 3 black legends, CeCe Sabathia, Dave Parker, and Dick Allen. Parker, who passed away last month, was honored by his son at the ceremony in Cooperstown, New York. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
For victims of drunk and drug driving, our grief is unique. But you are not alone. You always have a place at MAD. Call our 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It was a good night for both of LA's baseball teams. The Dodgers secured a 5-2 win at Cincinnati. Shohei Ohtani was busy on the base pass. He drove in 2 runs with a double and scored his 100th run on Freddie Freeman's RBI single. Ohtani leads the major leagues in runs scored. 3 homers helped the Angels beat Texas 6-4. Angels reliever Kelly Jansen pitched a scoreless 9th inning to earn his 19th save. Jansen has not allowed a run in 16 straight appearances. Congratulations to NASCAR race driver Bubba Wallace. On Sunday, Wallace became the first black driver to win a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, home of the Indy 500. The 31-year-old Wallace won NASCAR's Brickyard 400 Cup race. He was blazing the track in a Toyota Camry XSE. Wallace, a native of Mobile, Alabama, won his first race on the NASCAR circuit since 2021. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase offers tips for the local business owners in 2025. Small business landscape is ever-changing, and the Los Angeles market is no exception. A startup or legacy business, revisiting your mission statement and recalibrating offerings can renew opportunities for growth and innovations. Programs like Chase for Business Coaching for Impact gives entrepreneurs access to expert guidance, helping you streamline operations, strategize your growth, and navigate complex challenges. Businesses with a clear sense of purpose can navigate any challenge effectively, but also build stronger customer loyalty. Visit chase.com/coaching for impact for more information. This segment is sponsored by JP Morgan Chase.
Do Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms keep coming back? Tremfya, guselkumab, may help, with rapid remission achieved at 12 weeks and lasting clinical remission at 1 year. Some even saw visible improvement of their intestinal lining at 12 weeks and 1 year. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Healing is possible with Tremfya. Approximately 3 out of 10 patients were in endoscopic remission at 1 year, based on areas visualized on colonoscopy, which may not represent the deeper bowel layer or entire GI tract. Individual results may vary. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Are you wet shaving? You'll get razor bumps. Nah, Pops, I'm good with Gillette Skin Guard. How long you been growing that beard Mama hates anyway?
Since 77. I shaved and got ingrown so bad.
That's why I use the Gillette Skin Guard razor, face scrub, shave gel, and moisturizer, so I don't have to worry about new razor bumps or shaving irritation.
Gillette Skin Guard, huh? Your mama's gonna love this one.
The best a man can get keeps getting better with Gillette Skin Guard. Buy now at a retailer near you.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
You do belong here. I'm glad that you are here. We're speaking right now with Enrique Roig, former Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor for the Department of State. Like I said, we started out with so much stuff to unpack, but the most startling thing you've said so far is that, in your view, USAID is almost completely dismantled. And we think about this as a huge savings because we hear $1 billion here, $400 million there, without looking at the entire scope of the U.S. budget. And I put forth that I think one of the reasons we say that, because I myself have opined on this show that we spend too much money on military foreign aid, sending weapons to places so that we can prop up various wars and regimes. And I know there can be a humanitarian side to that, but when we see people starving in our own streets, I think that is a natural reaction. Why are we spending so much money on weaponry? And so I believe that's part of the messaging issue here, is that people don't understand the difference between food aid and military aid.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that's what happens a lot of times is people conflate the two. They think that somehow military assistance is somehow part of what gets described as foreign aid, or, and they're very different things. So, again, like I said earlier, if you look at the overall U.S. National budget in terms of what we spend on, again, defense spending, can average anywhere between 18 and 23% when you include all of DOD plus all national security related spending. And then the interest on the debt is 13%. And then USAID as a foreign assistance tool was only 1%. Now you can say, yeah, that's still a lot of money, obviously. $40-60 billion a year is pretty significant. And when we have a lot of needs here at home, one can make the argument, well, why aren't we spending that money here? Sure. But then again, we're spending 13% on our interest in our debt, and this recent big beautiful bill that was passed by the Trump administration will now add $3 trillion to the national debt. So that percentage is going to go up. So again, our priorities here are pretty skewed, and unfortunately I have to say there's been just so much gaslighting around USAID and foreign assistance to paint this picture that somehow we're spending these exorbitant amounts of money overseas in other countries, when that's not the case. If we really want to address issues like investing more here at home, economic development, and addressing potential repercussions of climate change when there's hurricanes and flooding, well, let's address the issue of the debt, right? Let's address the issue of national defense spending. Do we need to spend over $1 trillion on more military hardware and equipment at this stage in the game? So, these are all important discussions to have, but unfortunately USAID has been sort of thrown in the mix in a way that paints an unfair picture of what this agency was actually doing overseas on behalf of the U.S. public.
I want to circle back to something that you said a bit ago, which is that when we talk about immigration, right now we're seeing this emphasis on deportations, no matter where in the world folks go, but the idea of mitigating people coming the other way is something that doesn't get spoken on very often. I've seen it with my own eyes, as you know. I'm having traveled in Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala, how in particularly people want to talk about Haiti, these countries where either natural disasters, U.S. foreign policy, or U.S. appetite for drugs has impacted their safety and ability to earn a living, that can drive people this way. And I just don't think we talk about that in some of the programs that have worked with alternatives to gang life in those countries, or helping recover from natural disasters, those kinds of programs. I know not just through the Department of State, but also through some of your other work, you have implemented and overseen some of these types of programs. So can you describe what some of that looks like and how it works?
Sure. So I'll use two examples here. One is the case of Venezuela, and then the other one, Central America. So, starting with Venezuela, when you look at the large displacement of Venezuelans throughout the region, between 7 and 8 million Venezuelans who have left the country during the Chavez and now Maduro period for lots of reasons. But, the case being there that so many of these Venezuelans have settled in other countries. So 2.5 million in Colombia, another million in Ecuador, another million in Peru, and then, close to 1 million that have come here to the U.S. Many of the programs that USAID was running in Colombia were actually in support of the Colombian government to help reintegrate 2.5 million Venezuelans so they would not come to the United States. And similarly in Ecuador and Peru as well. So this is why, I often say these programs are so important to help mitigate that type of migration, because those individuals now did not come up here. They stayed there, right? And then similarly, when you look at Central America, where many Central Americans have come to the U.S. for economic reasons, primarily, some for political, who are fleeing Nicaragua, for example. The programs that we were working on there with USAID, whether it was on citizen security, to prevent the recruitment of young people into gangs, to reduce violence, to economic development programs, to offer up opportunities for women-owned small businesses, to provide humanitarian support in regions of Guatemala that were food insecure. All of those efforts, again, help mitigate Central Americans from coming to the U.S. Now, most of those programs, again, have been dismantled now. So while the Trump administration touts that the number of border encounters are at the lowest in history, I do have to point out that a lot of that is actually owed going back to the last year of the Biden administration, where these programs were really starting to have an impact, especially coming after the uptick we saw after COVID, where the numbers did escalate and reached pretty high numbers of border encounters. But because of the investments we were making and other things that were being done with like humanitarian parole, or trying to provide safe and legal pathways where people could request asylum in countries in the region, those all started to reduce the numbers in the last 6 months of the Biden administration. And now Trump is actually benefiting from that. But I have to say, again, a lot of what he does is political theater, because at the end of the day, even the deportation numbers, while we look at these horrible ICE raids, they're actually lower than they were during Obama and Biden, ironically enough. So we'll see how sustainable this approach is over the long term. But like I said earlier, you can't deport your way out of this problem if you're not trying to do something to mitigate and address the root causes of why people come to the U.S. Eventually, it's going to catch up with you.
A couple things there. When you say that, well, the deportation numbers are the same, that was my impression at first. It seems like now it's ramping up, but you're saying the numbers are the same. They're just more violent. They're involving the military. They're masking their faces. I mean, it feels a lot more invasive now. Certainly, there's more fear.
No, for sure. And I think obviously what they're trying to do is generate that fear, right? So when you've got masked ICE agents showing up at a Home Depot or at a farm, restaurants, these kinds of things, obviously they instill fear in the community. So now, folks don't want to actually show up for work anymore, which ironically also is going to have an impact on our own economy, right? We have a labor shortage here in the U.S. of between 3 and 4 million workers. And so you're already seeing, different companies, economic chambers and others who are, voicing their displeasure with the administration about what's happening with these raids and attempts at deportation, because again, the numbers just aren't there at the border to justify this kind of aggressive approach. So what the administration now is going after individuals who are actually trying to legalize their status in the U.S. or came here under humanitarian parole because they were fleeing a repressive regime, whether it was Venezuela, Nicaragua, or Cuba, and were allowed into the country, or those who actually did all the right things and solicited asylum through the CBP-1 Act, which has been also shut down by the administration, is now being used to re-migrate back to countries. So all of these efforts that we're looking for safe and legal pathways have been, for the most part, shut down. The other one is the H-2A and H-2B visas, right, which provide workers in agriculture, in the service industry, meat packing, tourism, elder care, nursing. That's where we also need to focus our attention, because we do need the labor in certain sectors that just, a lot of Americans aren't willing to work in that. Or we just have a shortage in many parts of the country, right? And so we do need comprehensive immigration reform in this country and, a rational conversation about how we deal with this problem in the long term, because what we're doing now is not going to solve the problem at the end of the day, right? It's not this crazy idea that you're just going to end up deporting 11 million people. Even with the increase in the ICE budget, I would say good luck to that. We're already seeing pushback from, many cities, activists who are organizing, people who are pushing back, even there in your city, the LA County Sheriff, Glendale, which terminated their contract with ICE for staging deportations, the Dodger organization. I mean, these are people are activating in a way to demonstrate, to showcase how horrible all of this is.
Friday,
so that's important.
Friday Jones in my chat room says, as many underemployed black folks know, we do not have an employment shortage. We continue to have a racism problem. I actually think both of those can be true and are true, but I just wondered how you would address that. Partly, when you say that we have Americans that don't want to work in home health care, for example. And we just had a Republican on the show last hour saying, well, if we paid more for these jobs, and I've had others in the chat saying the same thing, if those meat packing jobs paid $50 an hour, then maybe Americans would do them.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true, but that obviously has implications on the cost of these commodities, food, other products, as well as potential inflation. And that's why, a lot of these industries tend to recruit immigrant labor. But again, what I would say here is that it has to be done in a legal way as well, right? I mean, you can't have companies who are not doing their due diligence to verify the legal status of immigrants who want to work in those industries. And so that needs to be dealt with. I would say that a lot of the research, though, does indicate that there are, pockets within the country where there are labor shortages now. If, people are willing, they want to go to those places and work in those industries, of course, we should be hiring Americans first. But what we're seeing now that does not seem to be the case, right?
Right. But we still haven't addressed the racism question, because it is true. One thing Friday says that is true is, our resumes get rejected because of how our names sound and how we look. So for many black Americans, it's hard to fathom that there's an employment shortage, because when we try to go get a job, racism is playing a role.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I'm not going to argue against that. And I think that goes across the board with also Latino populations as well, right? And this is a common challenge for lots of populations here in the U.S. And so I think what, we need to have first an honest conversation about what's happening on the immigration side, how we deal with that, but also obviously on the employment side for, African Americans and others who want to work and want to be, considered for these different employment opportunities, and what's keeping them from being offered that option, right? If it's racism, if it's other considerations, let's deal with that. But at the end of the day, the reality is we do have a labor shortage that needs to be addressed in this country. We have an aging demographic. And so ultimately it's going to have an overall impact on the economy. And if we're not addressing that now and, doing things like increasing the national debt to $3 trillion, it will have long-term repercussions for us.
Yeah, we're talking with Enrique Roig, and we are talking international politics. How is it all connected? The impact of USAID. I think you're right that most of us don't even have a clue how this is going to impact or already is hitting our everyday lives. We'll look at that and more when we continue on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we're proud to be celebrating 4 years on the air, but we know we could not have made it this far without you. We work hard every single day to curate conversations that will enlighten, encourage, and empower you. So, from all of us at KBLA Talk 1580, a big thank you for your love and support.
You don't know how much you mean to me.
And by the way, if your smartphone did not update automatically, be sure to download our brand new KBLA 1580 app. We think you'll love all the new features, including new ways to send us photos and video in real time, whenever news breaks, while we're on the air. It's a new dawn, a new day for KBLA Talk 1580, and we're glad you're on this journey with us.
You never turned away, you were right there. Thank you, thank you.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Why'd I go to the doctor? My heart would race just taking my son to practice. It didn't feel right. So I got checked out. Turns out I have atrial fibrillation, which increases the risk of stroke about 5 times.
Symptoms like irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness can come and go. But if it's AFib, the risk of stroke remains. If you have symptoms, contact a doctor.
I'm so glad I did.
Visit NoTimeToWait.com. Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Continuing our conversation with Enrique Roig, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. You mentioned how we're talking about global impact, USAID, these programs that are being cut, dismantled, and your take that it's pretty much, the agency itself is pretty much a thing of the past at this point with just 200 remaining employees, and this idea that they can be incorporated into other parts of the government. 2 things on that. One, should we get a different administration that suddenly said, you know what, we need to go back to soft power and breaking the things we fix in the world, and fixing the things we break in the world, or trying to help clean up messes for which we are at least partially responsible. It wouldn't be something you could just stand up again in a month or 2, right? We're talking about expertise and people all over the world and different kinds of networks.
Yeah, Dominique, absolutely. It's much easier to destroy things than it is to rebuild them, right? And I'm not, going to sit here and tell you that somehow USAID also was the perfect agency. I was often a critic of many things that could be done better and reformed. But obviously, the way that this administration went about it was obviously extreme. It would have been much better to have had, a real reform conversation with Congress, who is, again, the lead in terms of their mandate to eliminate an agency or not, which they did not have the chance really to weigh in on that. And so in a future world, if this is to come back in some shape, there's a lot of ways, and a lot of people are working on this now to come up with proposals of how this should look and how it could be done effectively and better, and all of the things that we want to make sure that money is getting to the places where it should and having the desired impact. But that's not to say, and as Rubio has often now testified in Congress, that somehow this whole apparatus was one big giant waste of U.S. taxpayer money. That's just completely disingenuous, particularly coming from somebody who, as I said earlier, on many of his delegations overseas was the biggest champion of U.S. foreign assistance. So, we just need to have an honest conversation about this and try and look for ways to depoliticize this discussion, which it's just gone to an extreme that's not helpful for us as a country and our own national security.
When I read stories about things like $9.7 million worth of contraceptives being burned, this was stuff that was bought by USAID, or baby formula and food being destroyed in different countries because those pipelines are no longer operative through U.S. foreign aid, food rotting in harbors. Why does that have to happen? Even if you're shutting down the programs, why are we wasting and destroying these resources?
Well, because when you go back to how DOGE, went about this, one of the first things was to stop paying USAID partners. So you've got all these organizations working overseas that all of a sudden weren't receiving any funding or any payments for services and goods that they already provided the U.S. government. So a lot of them had to start scaling back and letting go staff and reducing their operations overseas. And so when you're in that predicament, and then of course there was litigation filed, and that's working its way through the courts, where the government now is required to pay back those agencies, but it's slow moving because again, there's like no capacity left at USAID to actually even like do things like process payments. So many of these organizations and overseas aren't going to take on more financial risk if they're not even sure if the U.S. government's going to pay them, right? So then what ends up happening is, it affects the distribution of goods, the warehousing, and now you're in this predicament where, the administration is, looking at burning stuff, which should be, sent overseas to, help starving populations that need it, instead of spending taxpayer money to actually burn things in warehouses. That's where we're at this point. It's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah, it's a lot crazy. And when you talk about impact on day-to-day lives, we just have a couple minutes here in the United States. What kinds of things are you talking about?
Well, again, going back to the idea of a lot of USAID work overseas when it's crisis prevention and providing humanitarian assistance, global health programs, preventing pandemics, things that people don't see on a daily basis that, when you've got, for example, prevention of the spread of Ebola or other contagious diseases from coming to the U.S. because you're dealing with it in the country of origin, that obviously impacts people here who are not going to get sick, right? Similarly, again, if you're providing humanitarian assistance to displaced populations in a conflict zone and trying to negotiate the end to a conflict, what you're doing is hoping that people will stay there and at some point it will stabilize so they can begin to at least, build back their lives instead of migrating and coming to the U.S. or to Europe. We've seen this, again, played out throughout the Western Hemisphere with the displacement of 7 to 8 million Venezuelans, many of which did not come to the U.S. because of USAID programs to help them reintegrate into countries like Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. So these are the kinds of things that have an impact on our national security. It's just often people aren't aware of that. They don't see it. It's not, going to be in your everyday TikTok feed about what's happening, right? So, and that's where I go back to that. We just have to do a better job of communicating all this stuff. And I'm so glad that you've had me on today to be able to actually share a lot of this with you and the audience.
I appreciate your insights. We've got about a minute here left. Enrique Roig, what would you like to spend it on? Maybe you want to share where people can follow your writings and work.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it with folks that, foreign assistance has always played an important part in U.S. national security. As I mentioned earlier, it's 1% of our national budget, and it's built so much goodwill for the U.S. overseas, and we're actually able to help save people's lives. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. We want to be in a position where we're living out our values and principles, because at the end of the day, Americans are good people, and we want to be able to also do good in the world.
Yeah, that's well said. And your handles, you want to share some handles?
You can find me on Substack. Just look me up, Enrique Roig. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. So I am an active writer and do a lot of media interviews, and happy to share that in the chat when we're done.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the insights.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to talk to you.
Tavis Smiley's up next. As usual, he's got a full busy lineup for your brain this morning, so definitely want to keep it locked for that. Let's keep talking on social media. I'm at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima, and then radio on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and yes, on, what did I leave off? Oh, yeah, YouTube. Like my mama used to say, history is now. Like I always say, we're making it together. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. Over 170 people were evacuated using emergency slides after an aborted takeoff on a Denver to Miami flight.
When I heard the boom, I knew something was wrong. It was a loud noise.